Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host, Raider. Are you a veteran who has claimed PTSD, be it fear-based PTSD, combat PTSD, or MST, or personal trauma? If you're somebody that has filed those types of claims and you were unfortunately denied, it might not be for legitimate reasons. It might be due to either a lack of actual understanding of the rules and regulations by the person adjudicating it, or, and I don't mean to think like this, it was intentional based upon the bias of the individual that was reviewing your claim. Now, I have personally noticed certain PTSD claims getting a lot of scrutiny and statements being made inside rating narratives that are not factually accurate per the M21 manual. And this is specific towards MST and fear-based PTSD. So in this video, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be highlighting the problem as I have seen it, and I'm also going to be providing you with ways that you can potentially combat it. So this is most likely going to be through a higher level review, and I'm going to give you the manual references that you need if your set of circumstances match up with what I'm talking about. Now, incompetence versus, incompetence related to training or just intentional, willful disregard for the rules. I don't know what's causing this. All I know is that there are some alarming trends that do not typically equate to the veteran getting granted. And then after that, the denials just keep rolling on top of each other because the rater that negatively adjudicates the original PTSD sets a precedent in that denial that is not factually accurate. So let me get in here. Let me share my screen. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So what I'm talking about in this section of the manual is 841D2J. What I'm talking about is the premise that for MST, you have to have PTSD be diagnosed in order for you to be granted using markers. For fear-based PTSD, you have to have a diagnosis of PTSD in order to be granted fear-based PTSD. Those two statements I have seen a lot of the times in rating decision denials, and they are factually untrue. They're not true statements. And I will show you in this manual reference, it highlights specifically, specifically how the rater is supposed to conduct business, Now, the claim is based upon MST personal trauma. So the veteran explicitly claimed MST. The service records or alternative evidence is sufficient to establish that the claimed in-service personal trauma occurred, and the examiner links the diagnosis to the claimant's history, but determines that a diagnosis other than PTSD. So the veteran made the claim for MST, PTSD. Their markers are enough. The alternative evidence is enough to show that something did happen in service. And then it's time to get to the diagnosis, and the examiner says, the thing I have diagnosed this veteran with is related to their in-service stressor marker event. Well, even if the examiner determines that a diagnosis other than PTSD better fits the current symptoms, then the rater is supposed to grant the claim. What's been happening here is that the rater has been denying the claims, saying that it requires, in order to use markers, you need a current diagnosis of PTSD. Well, that's not true. It says it right here. Determines that a diagnosis other than PTSD, so depressive disorder, any one of these more accurately describes the current disability, you are to grant. Now, unlike a lot of other situations, this right here is a clear and unmistakable error. If this fact pattern right here is true, the rater doesn't have a choice. They have to grant. That is clear, that is unmistakable, and it would be an error to deny just based on the fact that the veteran did not have a diagnosis of PTSD. So that's the MST portion of it, okay? But the same thing has been done to fear-based PTSD, okay? So claimants file a fear-based, risk of hostile military or terrorist activity. They served in Southwest Asia, they served in Vietnam, they served wherever they did. The stressor development supports that the veteran served in an area at a time in which there was either hostile military or terrorist activity. And the examiner links the diagnosis, no different than it was for MST. They link the diagnosis to the claimant's history, in-service history, but determines that a diagnosis other than PTSD better suits the veterans. There is a difference for the fear-based. So fear-based, if you have a diagnosis other than PTSD, it's not an automatic denial. And that's what I've been seeing, where there's no additional development done, there's no nothing. They just say, look, you don't have a diagnosis of PTSD, denied. Veterans who have claimed this fact pattern and veterans who have established that they were in country, they were somewhere scary that is deemed approved for hostile military or terrorist activity locations, but they have a diagnosis other than PTSD, they've been getting automatically denied. And that is actually factually inaccurate. It says, before making a decision, proceed with development research as described in this manual reference. So what they're looking for is normally fear-based PTSD. If you went there and you have a diagnosis of PTSD, there's no need to prove anything. Okay? They just it's a quasi-presumptive that happens. As long as the examiner says that your particular PTSD is related to the stressor while you were in country or in theater, then then you're fine. If it's due to something else, then the denial was accurate. So if it had nothing to do with service, but the problem is that there is an additional set of requirements that have to be completed before a denial can be established. And what I've been noticing is staff members, for whatever reason, are skipping this step. And they're just going, oh, you don't have a PTSD diagnosis? Denied. And that is exceedingly frustrating because someone took the time to write up this manual to give instructions. The least the staff members could do is follow them. Okay? So what happens if you are somebody in this circumstance where you claimed fear-based and you have to explicitly claim it on your form? They cannot infer it. You have to say, I'm claiming fear of hostile military or terrorist activity on your claim form. And you were served in country. So what they say with this additional development is that you have to show a specific stressor that can be proven. We took a Scud missile attack on this date, this time. And as long as that can be corroborated, then you can grant. But it says right here, deny the claim if either no specific experiences are claimed beyond service within the theater of the hostile military activity. So if you have a diagnosis other than PTSD, you cannot claim I was there, so that's my stressor. You have to state something else. But when you initially file the claim, you say I was there and it was scary. And if they give you a diagnosis of PTSD, then you get granted. But additional research does not support that the claimed in-service events forming the foundation of the examination diagnosis occurred. These are the denial requirements. So if the rater and VSR do not take the actions of researching and getting with you and saying, hey, look, do you have any specific scary things that happened to you while you were in country? Then they didn't complete their job. And the denial was premature. In both of these scenarios, the denial would be premature. This is not so much of a clear and unmistakable error. So the PTSD, the other diagnosis than PTSD for fear-based is not a clear and unmistakable error because it requires additional development. But the MST one is, if you meet this fact pattern, it absolutely is a clear and unmistakable error if they don't grant you. Okay. So that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. Now, if I go up here to this trauma stressor, see this 2C section, I pulled that up too. If you are fighting this, if you are somebody that was erroneously denied for the MST version of this, like let's say you got major depressive disorder, but they link it all back to the MST event, the person-on-person trauma, my advice to you would be to do a higher level review. And I would cite this manual reference right here as being one of the reasons why the rater did not apply this particular manual reference in their determination. One of the things that has been reported to me time and time again is that the staff members are saying that markers cannot be used for non-PTSD determinations. Well, if I go to this manual reference right here, no, it's this one. Yeah, it's this one right here. So it's 841E1C. And then if I come down here, alternative evidence also includes markers. The word markers is right here. So I would also cite this particular manual reference. So I would do a higher level review on this and show where the markers are erroneously, incorrectly not applied, because the rules and regulations for how MST other than PTSD diagnosis should be applied and how alternative evidence is to be applied is that markers are supposed to be part of that. Now, for the actual fear-based PTSD, what I'm going to say is I might also do a higher level review. The reason why I would do this over a supplemental claim, because you do have additional development that needs to be done in order to prove it. But a DRO can do what is known as directed development on a VA Form 20-0999 form. The directed development forces the VSR and the rater to have to consider doing this development. If you just did a supplemental claim, you could get another VSR and another rater who do not understand this manual reference. So the cycle just keeps continuing and you're just frustrated. But the DRO is used to looking at this and going, yeah, they didn't do that. They do a lot more contrasting, so showing what the rater and the VSR didn't do that they were supposed to do. So if you highlight this to them, they can do that directed development and force the hand of VSRs and raters who might not actually do it on their own due to either incompetence or intentionally not wanting to do it, which that does happen, unfortunately. So these are the two things that I wanted to just kind of highlight to the community, because we've seen a lot of PTSD denials that are premature in my mind because they didn't actually take the proper steps to do the development, or they were just flat out wrong because the markers say yes, everything says yes, and they should grant the claim as dictated in the M21 manual, but they didn't. So one of the other things that I wanted to bring up while I was here related to PTSD is that staff members, for whatever reason, have lost their mind. And they've been ordering medical opinions for PTSD. And there is no reason for anyone to order a PTSD medical opinion unless there's conflicting evidence. You should not be doing that VA raters, VA VSRs. Do you want to know why you shouldn't be doing that? Because the actual PTSD DBQ has a built-in medical opinion. It's the stressor verification portion where they say, is stressor 1 the cause of the current PTSD? So if they mark yes in the stressor section, did this stressor cause PTSD? That is their medical opinion. Now, there's no need to provide a separate medical opinion saying that that caused that. The rater is the one that determines whether or not PTSD is service connected because they have to corroborate the stressor. they have to determine whether or not the stressor that is being claimed by the veteran is the same one that the examiner said caused the PTSD. If it is, and the PTSD stressor can be corroborated, the one that's listed in the DBQ, then they grant. If it can't be, then sometimes they can send it back for another medical opinion. But I do not understand why staff members, VSRs, and raters keep doing PTSD medical opinions. They're not required. They're not indicated anywhere that you need to do it because it's got a built-in actual medical opinion. So please stop doing this. You're just delaying claims for no reason to get points. That's why. Okay, please stop doing this. That's where I start to lean more towards the incompetence or self-serving nature of it, is because it's not harmless in a lot of instances. People just do it because they are either chasing points or they don't know any better and have no desire to better themselves. And some of you might say, well, that's a little harsh. And I'll agree that it is, but it's also accurate. There's a lot of times whenever staff members don't get adequate training, and it can take a year and a half before anyone notices that somebody was doing the wrong thing on over 100 claims a month. Do that math for a second. The turnaround time for correcting when somebody is doing something wrong is a long, long period. It takes a long time just for the individual, not fixing a systemic issue, but just fixing the actual person. All right. Well, that's about all I got for you in this one. My phone just keeps ringing off the hook, so I keep getting interrupted. So that's about all I got for you. Just to re-summarize, my advice is check these manual references, double check that your situation falls within these lines. But for MST and fear-based PTSD, if you were erroneously denied and you met criteria and you have all these things, but they said that because you weren't diagnosed with PTSD, you can't be granted under these criteria. There's more to it than that. So you might have to get with a VSO of some kind, somebody that has VBMS access, and review your circumstances and situation, because you can't fix a problem unless you understand where the breakdown happened, right? And if the breakdown is the staff members didn't apply the rules and regulations appropriately, then that's going to be a higher level review for you to say, hey, look, they didn't do what they should have done. But anyway, guys, that's about all I got for you in this one. Raider out.